Okay, guys, so I saw this video on my recommendeds, and while I was showering, I was listening to the whole thing. And it just, as the video went on, I really, really wish I could speak to this guy in person. And I thought I'd just record this rambling and respond to respond to all the things as they come.
Video. The goal of our organization is not to convince people who have no kids to have 2 kids or 1 kid. It's to convince people who have 4 kids and to make it easier for people who have 4 kids to have 9 kids if they want.
This is Malcolm Collins. Malcolm and his wife Simone are authors, private equity investors, and venture capitalists based in Pennsylvania. Earlier this year, they welcomed their amazingly named 4th child, Industry Americas, into the world. But if a family of 6 sounds like a
I absolutely agree with this guy. Like, what kind of shit is this? Industry Americas Collins. That's insane.
Industry Americas into the world. But if a family of 6 sounds like a pretty full house already, they don't plan to stop there.
We're gonna have more than 7 if we can, basically, until my uterus is forcibly removed in a botched surgery. I'm gonna keep going.
If you keep even vaguely up to date on the news, you've likely seen the Collinses about before. They've been interviewed a lot over the past few years, in newspapers, on podcasts, on TV, and that's because the Collinses aren't just planning to have lots of kids simply because they're fond of children. No, they're the leading lights of a niche yet vociferous movement which they call pronatalism.
So the Pronatalist Foundation, which we run, says no matter what, we are going to have demographic collapse in the developed world, and it will wreak havoc on the economy. Our goal as an organization is to preserve as much of our existing human diversity as possible into the future.
Their core belief is that the greatest threat.
So that guy, Malcolm Collins, I know him. I've read some of his books. His book series is The Pragmatist Guide to, and then he puts like The Pragmatist Guide to Governance, The Pragmatist Guide to Living Your Life, etc. I don't know of his actual intentions. He claims to want the future to be brighter. Essentially what he wants is the future to be happy. You get what I mean. And I don't know of his intentions. Personally, I dislike the guy. I don't know how much of it is just his personality and just his messaging. I do agree with some of his ideas, but I am suspicious of his intentions.
Threat currently facing humanity is not climate change, inequality, zoonotic disease, or any of the usual concerns you might hear raised about our crisis-stricken world, but instead, declining birth rates.
It's so much worse than people think. So if you look at the United States, if you project forward the decline in fertility rate we have had in the past 10 years, and you assume 1 generation every 30 years, for every 100 Americans, there's only going to be around 4.3 great-grandchildren.
The Collinses aren't alone in harboring this fear that humanity might be on the brink of dying out. Pronatalism has become a highly fashionable thought trend in Silicon Valley.
Oh my god, and this is absolutely true. I hate this guy. Not for the reasons most leftists hate this guy. I don't know if I would consider myself a leftist, but usually wealthy folks, the reason that they take so much issue, and I'm just speaking like completely off the cuff here, I'm just speaking out of my ass. From what I've seen at least, most wealthy people just take issue with it for obvious reasons. Just, you know, there's when there are fewer, I think What If Altus spoke of this, people treat human capital just like, in the same way that they treat other resources, where the less there is of something, the more valuable it is. I'm certain all of you know this. It's a cycle, and if there are fewer people, the value of labor goes up, and thus the value of the individual worker, the leverage that he has, it's better. They have greater leverage. You saw this happen during the Black Plague in Europe, where the survivors of the Black Plague, they were better off for it. They were paid better. They had more leverage in negotiations, etc. Let's see where this goes.
Elon Musk has repeatedly stated that what he calls population collapse represents an existential threat to humanity, a position which appears to have factored into his own decision to have fathered 12 children.
Yeah, fathered 12 children. He doesn't spend time with any of them. One of his, I think, one of his daughters came out as transgender. This guy's just like an inhuman to me. He's completely inhuman. Like, he lives just to, be congratulated and applauded by randoms. His dad, he owned an emerald mine. Just a bad guy, terrible guy overall. He doesn't spend any time with his children. He doesn't have a monogamous relationship. I hate this guy completely. He's a Fox Christian. He's like, he sympathizes supposedly with Christian values. I despise him. Aspirationally Jewish, ridiculous, dude. I hate this guy.
Children at time of recording. From there, the belief that we urgently need to boost birth rates has become a recurring theme both in the contrarian podcast sphere and in formal conservative politics at the very highest levels.
We don't have enough families and children to continue as a nation.
There is one critical outcome that liberal individualism has completely failed to deliver, and that is babies.
We want to produce babies in this country, right? We want to produce babies. When I first started making this video, I was pretty skeptical of this whole population collapse thesis, given the rogues gallery of populists.
This guy is completely absurd. I can't believe you can be a person in 2024 and be completely ignorant or not know of population collapse or the issues with demographic collapse. This is what I mean with most leftists. They're so hyper-focused on whatever it is that they study. So I spoke with a friend about this. It seems to me that there's a certain psychological profile where if you speak to them with any topic outside of their expertise, they can't have a conversation with you about that topic. So I was speaking with a person who was studying biology, and they were having conversation. We were having conversation about I think it was to do with eugenics, and she was just espousing everything that was taught to her by the professor and from the book, word for word, no original thought whatsoever. I think it was something about, most people with a certain psychological profile that tends towards being leftist. You ask them, what is it with eugenics that you take issue with? And they'll just, they're on your case. And I agree with them for the most part. Most people that speak of eugenics and speak of its benefits, they do have negative intentions. They're evil people usually. I'm not. And I made that pretty clear to the person, but they just would not have the conversation. I think I spoke of how some, what is it? I'll just get onto that conversation in some other video.
Some reactionaries that become the leading lights of the pronatalism movement, it's easy to push it aside as just another conspiracy theory. The latest installment in the franchise which brought us vaccine passports, 15-minute cities, and they're eating the dogs. They're eating the dogs! The more time I spent digging around this topic, however, the clearer...
Actually, hold on. I've changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead and finish that thread. So this person is of the psychological profile of I've not completely categorized them, but essentially what they are is a run-of-the-mill leftist person. Now that's a difficult category, right? That sounds really broad, but I'm certain you've met with these people. So if you want to talk with them about something, it has to be related completely to that which they have an expertise in. All else that falls outside of that which they have an expertise in, you cannot have a conversation with them. So these people don't know anything that they don't already study. That woman who had studied biology, I wanted to speak with her about eugenics and the philosophy of eugenics and the issues with it, how it relates to demographic collapse, how it relates to politics and culture, and it just they couldn't. They only wanted to, they kept correcting me on definitions, because when you speak, for example, you'll use words like I don't know, let's say you use the word vestigial, but you use it in the sense that you say, oh, this is vestigial. That is to say that it was useful in the past, it's no longer useful now. But she would correct me, and she said you can only use that as it applies to limbs. And, it's just absurd, because when I speak to you, when I speak to any person, and you use the word vestigial, you mean it in the broad sense. That is to say, something that was useful in the past and is no longer useful now. And they can't have these conversations with you later. It seems like they're speaking with you purely to show you how much of their own, how much of an expert they are in that field. I don't know where I was going with that, but I did want to close that thread.
The dogs. The more time I spent digging around this topic, however, the clearer it seems that declining birth rates really are about to lead to some pretty significant social and economic challenges.
See, this is what I mean. How are you completely... The more time I spent digging into this, the more I started to notice that demographic collapse would be an issue. How is this possible, dude? How do you live in 2024 without having an idea of what's going on? And a pretty... How was it to say? A pretty... I think the average person just browsing the internet would probably have an idea of this.
For many countries. Probably the country that you're watching this from right now. There are a few questions I want to try and answer over the next however many minutes then. Firstly, how bad really is the decline in birth rates which the pronatalists are so incensed by? Secondly, why are they so interested in this crisis over the many other challenges the world is presently facing? And thirdly, does the pronatalism movement actually have any useful answers to the world's baby drought, or are the real solutions ones which the Collinses, Musk, Trump and their allies would be unlikely to find so appealing? Any discussion of modern-day concerns about birth rates has to start with this book. This is The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich.
Oh my god, and that's how you can tell this is a leftist video. It's made by a leftist person. They always started with this fucking, this book and these predictions, and I can tell you how it's gonna end. So, essentially what they'll say is, this guy, you see, he was worried about a population explosion, and he was wrong, and so these guys who are worried about a population implosion, they'll also be wrong. How? But by some miracle, bro. It'll just fix itself. It'll just work itself out, And it's just absurd to me when people mention this, because it's true. There are situations in the world where if you let it happen, if you let things be, it'll fix itself. But the people that live during the phase from when it begins to when it ends, they do end up suffering. And they'll say that's essentially what they're saying. This guy predicted a population explosion, and he was wrong, and the situation fixed itself. And so those who predict a population implosion, they'll probably also be wrong. How? By some miracle, and it'll fix itself.
Published in 1968, Ehrlich's book makes exactly the opposite argument to that of today's pronatalists. Rather than population collapse, it warns of a rapidly approaching future in which an exponential rise in the number of babies being born means there are more human beings alive on planet Earth than planet Earth can adequately sustain.
The main premise is that there's 3.6 billion people in the world today, and we're adding about 70 million a year, and that's too many. It's too many because we are getting desperately short of food, that we're very much short of other resources, and above all, the very delicate life support systems of the planet, the things that supply us with all of our food, ultimately with all of our oxygen, with all of our waste.
And these... I will also mention that these analyses that these guys make, they're so low IQ. Essentially what they're doing is here, let me pull it up here. what most of these guys do, and this is also a pretty low IQ